So Sam, yeah, you said that well, first of all, gosh, I mean, where do I begin, Sam? First of all, I'd like to thank you for joining this because amazingly, it is very hard for me to get TV people. And that's number one. Number two is I did interview you some years ago, many years ago, when you were pretty much starting out, I'd say. And you have become more successful and it's not gone to your head. I'm very impressed. Like you answer my messages on Twitter, etc. So that's pretty cool.
You can call me a TV person if you choose, but at heart, I am forever a radio producer that had to cut highlights for the Cubs and Blackhawks. When the Cubs lost 100 games in 2012, Blackhawks finally got good, won some Stanley Cups. But I always have time for my friends. You know that. And we
Thank
go
you.
way back. We go back like 9 years ago when you used to find me hiding in Orion Samuelson's booth, like trying to catch a nap on the overnight shift.
Yeah, and also you gave me a hard time because I used to go into the newsroom at WGN Radio and I used to look at the schedule. I have no idea why. Maybe because I wanted to catch certain people at a certain time to ask them to be on my podcast. I don't know what it was, but yeah, you're pointing that out. And then yeah, I feel like I knew you in the early years because when did you start in media?
2011 was when I got hired by Metro Networks at the time. They're like, hey, we need somebody that won't need money. And I was like, well, that's perfect right here. I don't need any money. Why would I need money? They go, we need you to go to Wrigley and Sox Park and interview the visiting coaches and players. Would you like to do that? I said, hell yeah, I would. Of course I would. Yeah. I mean, a lot of the internships that unfortunately existed at that time, you'd go get somebody's lunch or you screen phone calls or you do both and then just sit there and twiddle your thumbs. This internship was going to baseball games and interviewing players. Now, at the time, I was super terrified because I'm 21, 22 years old, standing in a clubhouse, like shaking, never asked questions in that first season, but just to get comfortable being around a locker room. It's like, you can't exactly teach that. You can't practice, you could practice your air checks. You could sit in the office or the studio and do a podcast, or you could do a television reel, but you can't replicate being in a Major League Baseball clubhouse. Like that's something that it doesn't just happen. So I take that experience and then just roll that over. And I think you and I discussed this before. I think I interned about 5 times for nothing, which, now
at WGN Radio?
No, it was different. It was WLS. It was Metro Networks. It was Illinois Radio Network, then WGN a couple times. So 4 places, 6 internships. But I think the big lesson from that is that, working and proving that you could be around is the most important skill in media, because so many people now, they're 22, 23. Like I get messages on LinkedIn all the time. Like, hey, could you give me a job? Like that's the hook. That's the intro. Like, hey, love your stuff at NESN. Could you help me get a job? ? And I think to myself, like, how do we get from 10 to 90 miles an hour? Like, I don't even know you.
Well, maybe, yeah, because maybe they read somewhere that's how you do it or something. But by the way, I put the Twitter link in the chat so you can share it. But
I will share it.
Yeah, can you just say, first of all, explain what is NESN?
So NESN is the New England Sports Network, and we are the regional network. We're owned by the Boston Red Sox and the Boston Bruins, and we cover this region up here. I'm going to try this without notes. Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island. Ding, 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 ding. And we are the source for New England sports. Like NBC Sports Chicago covers that whole market. You have all these different networks across the country. This is not a national network. It's a regional network, but we air every Red Sox game minus about 20 or 30. And we air every Bruins game minus about 10, 15, depending on if the big networks come in and absorb those games. So we are all Red Sox. We are all Bruins. And apparently now we are doing sports betting because we have a daily show on sports betting Monday through Friday, which to me is insane. We couldn't talk sports betting. I remember being on GN about, 7 years ago and giving the point spreads and the totals. And I remember one of the bosses was like, hey, we don't talk betting on the air. And now everybody wants to know who somebody likes for a certain game. So it has certainly come full circle. PASPA was struck down in May of 2018. So since that day in May of 2018, we are now live in 30 plus states across the country, live in Illinois. Do you gamble yet? Have we hooked you up yet?
No,
No.
I know what else. I don't even play games because it would not be good for me. However, my uncle, he passed away. He lived in Buffalo, New York for many, many, many years. He gambled for years. He was the coolest guy. He was a doctor, he was a professor. He went to the racetrack, went to the horses actually like every week, and he invested in the stock market. And then my cousin, his son, is like pro. Like I think he does poker or something, but he's also into it. But no, I'm not into it.
Not yet.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen, let's just say I think my uncle did well. Okay. And he did it for so many years. This is like way before it was like a thing. I mean, it was more like fringe, I'd say. And especially among professionals like him, it was not common. That's why he was so different. But
You're probably gonna hate this. I think I'm gonna make a bet on the Chicago Bears to have the worst record in the NFL.
oh, okay. I thought you meant they're going to go to a different
No,
kind of bet.
I'm going the other way. I'm going to the bottom. You can do this
Right.
now. It's like 15-1 that they have the worst record in the NFL. It probably won't happen, and the numbers say that at 15-1. But a $10 bet wins you 150. So if there are any Packer fans listening to this, yeah, I mean $10 wins 150. That's the way you bet. You bet a little to win a lot. You don't bet a lot to win a little.
Right. And then also, I remember this one semester I taught this podcasting class at Columbia, and one of my students is totally into betting, and he met you in like Las Vegas or something. And
is this Z?
Yes, yes.
Yes.
And so I said, hey, text him right now. Like usually a teacher doesn't tell people to text. I text him right now and tell him that you're in my class. And he's like, okay. And I think he did. So it was funny. It's
and
a
he's
small
getting
world.
hooked up now. Well, he did the right thing though. Like he came in on the ground floor and he asked the right questions and he sent me some tapes. And of course, having a mutual friend always helps. And I always look out for people because I remember being in college and like at that time, we had to like email people because Twitter wasn't really that big of a thing. You had to get somebody's email and then say a Hail Mary, cross your fingers, cross your toes that they would see the email and then respond to the email. But now I think that personal connection where, you can introduce me to somebody or I can introduce somebody to you and then make that introduction. It's super helpful, but he's a good kid, but he had his head on straight.
Yeah.
He had questions to ask. He didn't have, objectives. He didn't have favors to ask. He had questions to ask. And I think it's important when you're that age and you're still in college to ask the right questions. Like if you can, borrow somebody's time for 30 minutes or an hour, like make the most of it. Don't just ask for jobs and ask for favors because that's going to get you nowhere real fast.
Why do you think people do it that way?
I don't know. I think society has certainly changed. I think nobody really wants to do the hard work. Nobody certainly wants to work for free. But if I didn't have those internships, like I wouldn't be here. Like I've always looked at life as sort of like we're building a big stew, if that makes any sense. And it takes decades to cook, but you have to throw different ingredients in along the way. And the friendships you make and the relationships you build, they all go into that stew. People that I met at 19 might be able to help me at 23, who could help me at 27. I moved to Vegas and work at VSiN. And the guy that I initially worked for there tells me, hey, I'm going to bring you to Boston when he leaves VSiN for NESN. And I'm like, yeah, all right. Yeah, you'll bring me to Boston. All right. And he brought me here. He's the reason I'm here. So that networking is everything. But I feel like the initial step or the initial hop, skip, and jump, people don't want to skip to that first stone. They want to skip to the fifth or sixth stone. And that's just doing it wrong, at least in sports media. Like, I don't know what it's like in accounting or finance or things like that or marketing. But I know in media, it's about paying your dues and it's about meeting people, remembering people, and taking that network that you've built and utilizing it.
Yeah, this is similar to what you said years ago. It's like you haven't changed because, I mean, in a good way, because I remember you talking about, paying your dues and everything. And at that point, it was still early. It was only a few years when you were in the business. And, but yeah, I think with, counting also, there are more jobs and so forth. But in media, yes, I have noticed that. But everybody wants to work in sports media, it seems. So like, for instance, my former student, but he did do it right because he had his own podcast. He went to Las Vegas, he networked, et cetera, et cetera. But what is some specific advice you have for people want to go to sports media?
sports media is, it's ever changing. I think the days of reading the sports pages, as much as many of my colleagues would hate for me to say this, I think the days of us getting the paper on our doorstep and flipping to the sports section, I think that's going to be out of commission pretty soon. I like reading the paper, but how many people under the age of 30 read the newspaper? So it's going to a digital social type play where it's about traffic and clicks, and really the balance of content with the social existence. Like, that's where it's all at. I mean, people get discovered by going viral on the internet. And that's not to say that that's an easy path, but I know people at several networks who have been discovered by just being active and being around on social media. And, back in the day, 20, 30 years ago, we had to either turn on the 10 o'clock news or 11 o'clock news and see what happened in the game, or read the paper the following morning. But now, we could track these games on our phone. So I don't need to know that, so-and-so just got a base hit or so-and-so just hit a home run. It's become more of a reactionary type field. Like, okay, yes, that happened, but how do you react to it? What do you think of this big moment? So sports have become less about the news and more about reacting to the news. So what I've been sort of telling, younger sports hopefuls is that, you need to have a blog. Yeah. You need to have some sort of an outlet to react to said stories. Like the White Sox are a train wreck right now. Rather than tell me the White Sox are a train wreck, tell me why they're a train wreck, or how it makes you feel as a lifelong White Sox fan that you have to root for a team that can't get out of its own way. We don't need the obvious anymore. We want the second and third layer. And that's how sports media has really transformed since I started in the early 2010s to where we're at now. It's reactionary. We don't want to know what happened on the field. We want to know your reaction to what happened on the field. And that's how it's really changed.
So what are you, do you ever talk to people who started out a long time ago, and what's their reaction to what you're saying, these kinds of changes?
Well, they see it coming. Trust me. Several guys that covered, baseball and basketball and football for 20, 30 years, they're like, hey, the paper jobs are lessening. And I don't need to tell you, the newspaper used to be like that, and now the newspaper is like that. So the jobs have really, there used to be, I remember going to my first Bears game as a reporter in 2012, 2013, and the Sun-Times had 4 people in the press box. And now the Sun-Times has 2 people in the press box. And 10 years from now, they might have 1 person in the press box. So I don't think it's really what they, I don't want to say I don't care what they think, but I see the changes. We all see the changes. The papers are smaller, the staffs are lower, the buyouts are higher. Look what happened to the Tribune. That was, the paper of all papers in the Midwest. And now it's sad to see. So I don't know, I don't have a solution to that. I hope you don't ask me how to fix newspapers, because I wasn't prepared for that question. But, it's less about the work, like the linear progression of covering an event. It's just come so far out from what it was. And, I'm telling you, like, podcasting is such a thing now. Like, I'm amazed. Yeah, I work at a TV station, and I'm amazed at how many people come in and work and go, I listen to podcasts and podcasts only.
Wow.
Forget FM radio, AM radio. I'm listening to podcasts, or I have Apple Music, or I have Spotify, because we're now in this world. And even this goes to TV too. Like TV now, how many cord cutters do you know? Well, I don't want cable because I can pay for Netflix and Apple TV and ESPN Plus. It's almost like an a la carte type world where we consume what we want when we want. And that's like, podcasting is the hottest thing. And this is, of course, a podcast, but podcasting is the thing right now. And there's a lot of money going around for the right podcast. So that's sort of the way I see it. How can you reach users where they want to be reached? And that's really how you sustain an audience now, by getting them to a device that they're already going to, as opposed to something that they had to wait for, because we don't have to wait for anything anymore. We order food now. It's here in 30 minutes from somebody we don't even know. It's a what we want world, and we want it now.
But for podcasting, there are like millions of podcasts. Because when I interviewed you a long time ago, there weren't a lot of podcasts, or there weren't a lot of decent ones. Now there are. So how do people get noticed in the podcast world?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I think the proper usage of social media, I know, look, I can't touch on the importance of TikTok. I don't even know what a TikTok is still, unfortunately. But the way that people are able to use websites or apps like Instagram and TikTok, and I know Snapchat is pretty big, like there's a way to bolster an audience big time if you can navigate the social media space. I mean, you're right. Like if somebody looking to start a Chicago Bears podcast wants to start the 500 Chicago Bears podcast, there may not be much room to absorb other listeners. But if you break down like Chicago Bear quarterbacks, if that's your podcast, like Bear Down the Quarterback podcast, or, talk about the Chicago Cubs offense or something like that, like focusing and centralizing on something, I think it's still a specialty type place where if you want to do, like, I think the big mistake that people make is, all right, I'm going to do a podcast on football. There's a million podcasts on football, but how many podcasts are there on the Illini football team or the Notre Dame football team or, this conference or this state? I did a high school football podcast that used to somehow do numbers because guess how many other high school football podcasts there were in Illinois? There were none. So sort of filling a need for something that people are talking about or wondering about is sometimes half the battle. You don't want to be the 100th person in the same line. You want to be the first person in a new line. And that's, I think that works in this new media landscape where we want something different. We want something new, but we want something unique.
Well, I mean, do you think that listeners are looking for such niche podcasts?
I think they are. Yeah, you don't?
No, I do, because I teach this. I mean, I always say to the students, okay, you want to do X, do some research and see if other people are doing it. And then they'll find it. Yes. Especially with sports. Like they'll say, I want to do something else about sports. I'm like, well, you're competing against the big sports places. So I do think niche helps. And especially if you do a niche audio plus have a blog, then do it multimedia, like written and audio and video. If you put it all together, it'll help.
Yes. I think the more versatile you are, it certainly helps. I mean, every day now at work, I write, podcast, do videos, do live television, take the garbage out. No, I don't do the last part anymore. But the fact that, you can't just do one thing. And I think that's really cool too. Like I know a lot of people that go to games and they get to the game and the first thing they do is they do like a live stream on the phone. Like, hey, here I am on the field. And it's here's what's going on. Here's who's injured. Here are the biggest stories of the game. Follow my Twitter for more information. And then when the game starts, you're getting, facts and opinions from the Twitter. Maybe there's a live blog at halftime. You tweet again in the second half, third, fourth quarter of a football game. And then when the game is over, you're either doing a podcast from the field or you're writing a story from the field. So you're getting so many different avenues. It's not just, filing I know back in the day it was, all right, let's file 2 60-second wraps or 3 30-second wraps and go home, send the sound in, call it a day. We'll see you tomorrow. But now it's the person who's there early and the person who's interacting with his or her audience throughout the game and then doing more content after the game. That's the person you want to follow because they're giving you the most to snack on. And the more snacks in the snack aisle, it's probably more likely I'm going to leave with something, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. And that is real journalism right there when you're doing reporting like that. And then the analysis can come later. But when people are live reporting and showing pictures and showing video and so forth and giving the stats, that's really powerful, But okay, we were talking about going to locker rooms. What is it like to be in a sports locker room, a pro sports locker room?
Depends on the locker room. I mean, if it's the right locker room, it's one of the best places in the world. Like some of those Blackhawk locker rooms. I was actually telling the story the other day, covering that team from about 2012 to 2017. They won 2 Stanley Cups, but just the characters in that room. And it helps when you win, and they won a lot. But to have guys like Jonathan Taves, Patrick Kane, Marian Hossa, Duncan Keith, Brent Seabrook, Nick Jalmerson, Corey Crawford, Joel Quenneville was a very, at the time, a very successful head coach in the league. And of course, some things have come out after the fact, but that was a group at the time that it was always fun to go to work. And it was always fun to be around those guys because they respected one another. They respected the media and they were damn good. I was in a lot of bad locker rooms, like I don't know if I told you this story last time. No, I couldn't have because I would have been in the moment at the time. The Chicago Bears locker room with Jay Cutler was a nightmare. because he just didn't care about anything. He didn't care about his receivers, his offensive line, his fiance, his coach. Like, he cared about nothing.
What do you mean he didn't care? Did he say that, or
he was just so disconnected from everybody and everything? And he was so like, I just don't give a damn. Like, all I wanted, he had that vibe of, I just want to smoke a cigarette by myself. And that was the guy that, in that locker room that was supposed to be the piece that carried them to a Super Bowl. But you had a lot of people in that locker room, Brandon Marshall, Martellus Bennett, they used to conflict with Jay Cutler, who didn't care. And then the coach couldn't control the locker room. So, I mean, every locker room is different because the characters inside said locker rooms are different. I've been in some good ones. I've been in some really bad ones. That Bulls locker room too, like with Joakim Noah, Luol Deng, Derrick Rose, those were some really good locker rooms to be around.
But what is that like? Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, because I just want to say, Mike Reed said, "Love your show. Thanks for doing this live." Thanks, Mike. But the thing is that with the locker rooms that are really good, is it because they're a winning team, or what is it?
I mean, I was around a couple of Cub locker rooms, like when they first called up Anthony Rizzo in about 2012. They weren't winning, but you could tell that this kid at 22, 23 years old was the real deal. And he was a guy who was going to be a captain-like figure. You knew at 22, 23, he had the soul of a 33-year-old. And you knew he was a leader, and you could see that. And at that time, I'm 25, and I'm like, wow, this guy carries himself better than almost anybody in this locker room. And he's one of the youngest players on the team. So I think locker rooms, they change and they mold over time. But that 12 Cub team that I believe lost 101 games, you saw the beginning branches of what could be. And then a couple of years later, they bring up Javi Baez. And then the year after that, they bring up Chris Bryant. They bring up Kyle Schwarber, and they bring up Wilson Contreras. And it was like, you could see all of these ingredients coming together. And then that locker room, I mean, that was one of my favorite things to watch from a distance. Like, take year by year out of it, watching it from 2012 to 2016 when they win the World Series and break the curse. They just kept adding the right chemistry. And of course, bringing Joe Madden aboard certainly helped. He was the right manager at the right time for a team that was just so young and hungry and determined. And once those young players started to show what they were worth, that was when the Cubs said, all right, we're going to start spending money on the John Lesters and the Jason Haywards and the Ben Zobrist and the John Lackeys. It was almost like they had the freshmen in high school, and once the freshmen materialized into seniors, they went out and got other seniors from other cities and built like this super team. And it was the right mix at the right time. And that 16 Cub team, I mean, they knew they were good, but they backed it up too. And that was a very fun, and Madden kept things fresh. I mean, they had a 5-game losing streak one week in June or July, and he brought in like 30 flamingos to Wrigley. And it was just like, why are there flamingos here? Just to take the edge off and to keep them. Like, he was doing all kind of wacky stuff, but it worked for that team at that time. And the locker room is a very finicky space if it's not put together the right way. And there were some bad locker rooms, like when the White Sox brought Adam LaRoche in and gave his 12-year-old son a locker in the locker room.
Wait,
and
why?
I have no idea. That was the team that completely combusted. The team wanted to fight each other. Chris Sale was cutting uniforms up. That was a weird year, 2016 White Sox. But that was the year that Adam LaRoche's kid had his own locker in a locker room full of grown men.
Wow. Yeah. So then also they couldn't joke around with each other in a certain way, if you know what I mean. They couldn't do the locker room thing. That's what I meant.
No, of course not.
But I mean, do you think that if there is a lame locker room, do you think that the manager can sort of change the vibe of it, or is he just totally out of it at that point?
It's a very good question. I think it depends on how far along they are. I'll use a current example. This White Sox team has more talent than they've had in the last 20 years, but they have a manager who I don't know if he could chew gum and walk. Tony La Russa, who's a Hall of Fame manager, but at 78 years old, he's up there. And I think the White Sox, to rejuvenate their brand and recycle their system with a bunch of young kids in their mid-20s, does a 78-year-old manager resonate with a 25-year-old? Like, I don't know.
But we don't know. But I don't know. I know people always talk about age, but I don't know if that's true because he has a lot of experience. And come on, like, I mean, if you think about how he used to be. So one time I went online and I just looked at some videos of him talking back to the press or like arguing with umps. I know he does that lately because I know he was thrown out recently. But it was sort of funny. But also, I one time, yes, okay, on Sunday, I looked at all these old videos of Harry Carey and I saw this documentary and I saw Tony La Russa with the Angels. That's how old it was. And so I don't know, maybe, also older people can be sort of fun. So I don't know I don't know. I don't have an insider story on what's going on, but
I am so far removed now, but I know that this team is so like they've just disappointed. Like the fan base has turned on the team. The local media is starting to turn on the team. I'm sure people have seen that the post-game show on the network they play on just ripped them to shreds today. Yeah, Ozzie Guillen was tearing them apart, and Scott Podsednik had some words, and those are White Sox legends.
Yeah,
right. Yeah, it's one thing.
Especially Podsednik.
Yeah, I mean, the clip is out there, and it's like people are so fed up because this was supposed to be a World Series contender. And here they are. They're going to be pretty soon. They're going to be, I think, well, depending on what happens in the nightcap of the doubleheader, they might be like 8 games out of first place.
Yeah.
And they're probably not going to be a wild card team this year. So they need to win that division. And on July 12th, they're 7-8 games out of a division that is not good. It's the worst division in baseball. Yet they are so far out of first place. And look, the excuse of it's early, it's July.
Right.
That doesn't fly when you don't win.
Especially after last year. Is it? Yeah, especially because they did so well.
It does not fly.
I just messed up with Tony La Russa. I said the Angels. I meant Oakland and also the Cardinals. Okay, so I messed up on that. But
I love how panicked you got when you said Angels.
No, I was like Angels. I'm like, no, that's Joe. Joe's with the Angels now, or he was with the Angels. So
yeah, okay, he got heaved too.
Right, exactly. I was like, he was. I can't keep up. I'm not a sports person. But the thing is that no, but I was going to say about the White Sox, that one thing that's very typical, because I've seen a lot of games on TV and I saw one game in person, is that they'll have bases loaded and you think, okay, this is it, or no outs, or maybe 1 out, and they won't take advantage. And then you see another team have the same situation and they take advantage of it. They hit a home run or they hit, some guys in or something. So, but who knows? I mean, this is not White Sox sports talk right now, but yeah. When you were here, were you a White Sox fan or a Cubs fan?
Oh yeah. I grew up big White Sox fan, Southeast side. Yeah. 113th and Ewing is where I grew up, at least for the first 8-9 years of my life. So yeah, I only saw the city one way. I used to, when they would show like the city from Wrigley, like a game on WGN TV, I'm like, the city doesn't look like that.
Right. Exactly.
Because they're showing it from a different direction. And you had to learn that, oh yeah, you have to give those guys their day in court as well. But yeah, huge White Sox fan. And honestly, like of all the teams that I grew up rooting for and then had to cover as a reporter, that's the only team I still ride for hard. It's the only one that I like get upset about when they don't play well.
White Sox. Okay.
That's it.
But also now I'm impressed when you said you're from the West South Side, because I met people who say, or even on Twitter, they'll say they're from the South Side, but the parents moved when they were like 1 or maybe a baby. So it really does not qualify. So one time I asked somebody who's well known, I said, how long did you live on the South? They're like, oh, I'm a South Sider. I said, how long did you live on the South Side? And they didn't answer the question because I think they really didn't grow up there. So at least you spent the early part of your life there.
Well, 8 to 9 was on the South Side in our home, but then you'd hang out with the kids you grew up with. Like when I would hang out, we would go back to the Southeast Side until I was, 12, 13. And then I went to high school at 64th and Stony. So like I may have missed.
What high school did you go to?
Mount Carmel.
Okay.
So that's from when you go to high school when you're 14. So that's 14 to 18. So I was from birth to 9 and then all over the South Side from 9 to 13, 14. And then you're in the city Monday through Friday every day, 9 months out of the year. And you just get that culture because it's, I think at one point they said that high school had 200 zip codes going to that school every single day. And they stretched as far north as, the border, and as far as I think there was one kid that came from Valparaiso every day and everything in between. And we had, I'm telling you, that place was a freaking melting pot. I would say it was probably about 60% white, 25% black, and then like maybe 15% Hispanic. So I mean, you had like it was just like the lunchroom was just full of people from all walks of life, and that going to a place like that. Others went to St. Rita, Brother Rice. There are some schools on the north side that have the all boys high school, but definitely an experience. Oh, do you not like girls? No, that's not it. We all, well, I should say we all like girls, but I think it was definitely an experience. And then if you can make friends at a place nobody for 4 years, like I knew 2 people going in and then left knowing hundreds, that's like going to college before going to college. Because most people, barring a move or whatever, they go to school with the same people from 6 to 18 and then go to college, and then they hang out with, on the weekends they go home, or their friends from high school come to college. And like I went to college at 13, the way I look at it, and then went to college again at 18. And it was definitely an interesting track from birth to 18 in that city. But I miss it. I do miss it. I miss living there.
Well, do you live in the city of Boston now?
Yeah, we're pretty much in downtown Boston, but it's a lot different. I mean, there are some similarities for sure. I think there's an attitude here like there is back home. I think there's more of an edge in Boston, if that makes any sense. Like the people are somewhat.
I was just there like a few months ago. So what do you like? What's the edge?
I don't know. It's just like this. It's this hard-headed approach, this blue-collar approach. A lot of Chicagoans have it, especially if you hang out in the neighborhoods that I hung out in with a lot of police and firemen and their kids. It's just I don't know. It's not a bad thing. Like I appreciate the edge. Like there's camaraderie, but there's also like there's conflict there. Like it's a good thing. It's not. I don't mean that in a negative way, because there's an edge to Chicagoans. I mean, it's not like living in Los Angeles or living in Miami or whatever. But I think it's that work ethic. It's the ability to adapt to different situations. And it's that hard-headed approach to life. Like, hey, I'm going to go to work. I'm going to do my job. And then after that, I'm going to live my life. But we're going to take care of business first and foremost.
Yeah, no, this is very interesting because I've taught on the South side. I even have a pin to prove it. On the Southwest side for 15 years. I mean, right now I'm subbing at Daly College, and I love the South side. I mean, I love the people. I've had such great people, and even people I meet who I get along with, I'll say they won't be from the South side, from the city, but I'll say, where are you from? And they'll name some Southern suburb or some Southwest suburb. I just really, and the fact that you actually were there, you're not just saying South side, because some people say South side, but it's actually a suburb. It just really bothers me. I actually wrote a blog post about it, but maybe that's why you're very personable, because I know the North side's more interesting. Like we have more cafes, restaurants, etc. But South side people are so on the level, and like up on the north side, people might say like, oh, I'm so, blunt or whatever. And I'm on south side, I'm like, I'm so bougie. So I can't win either way. But
no, I feel like how it is. I try unfortunately, I keep it real sometimes too much, but that's how I grew up, and that's how that's how we all talk to each other. That's how our teachers talk to us in high school. That's how, that's just how it was. Yeah, so and and there's nothing wrong with that. But if I see somebody that I don't like and somebody asks me, like, hey, what do you think about that person? I'm going to tell you the truth. Like, I'm not going to say, oh, well, he's a good guy. Like, no, that guy sucks, right. Stay away from him. And you and I, we have some people that I know we feel the same about. But to your point about, the whole Chicago thing. Yeah. I mean, it always used to kill me when be down at U of I, I went to college down there. I started college down there, and you'd meet people out and you'd go, where are you from? Because that was always, like, where are you from? That was a very easy conversation starter at a college in the middle of nowhere. And it was, oh, Chicago. Oh, what part? Naperville. I'm like, exactly. This is not Chicago at all.
Yeah, because I'll say to people, I am from Chicago and I actually live downtown Chicago. Or I'll say, I've actually been in the city of Chicago. So yeah. But also, okay, let's go back to Boston for a second. You say it's like blue collar, but when I was there, I was near Beacon. I was actually in Beacon Hill, but there's also a large part of Boston that's actually pretty well off. Like it's not necessarily blue collar. It's very proper and.
Well, I can tell you Beacon Hill is like the fanciest neighborhood in Boston proper. So that is your fault, not their fault.
My cousin lives there. I have a cousin there.
There are, well, congrats to your cousin for being successful. There are, it's not like Chicago where, like say you go to Sox Park, and I'm sorry, I keep calling it Sox Park because I refuse to call it anything else. But if you go like drop a pin on 35th and Shields and go in the 5 blocks to the north, like go to 31st Street and then go 5 blocks the other way, and it's 2 completely different neighborhoods, 2 completely different sets of people, 2 completely different everything. And that, Chicago is very diverse, but it's also very segregated at the same time. Like if you go a mile east or west from somewhere, or north and south of somewhere, it's completely different. And you could even go like drop a pin on, Division and Halstead and go 2 miles west, 2 miles north, 2 miles south, and 2 miles east. And you just have like such differentiating neighborhoods and types of people and things like that. But in Boston's very crunched together. It's not spread out like Chicago is. And I think, proper Boston, yes, it's affluent, I guess. The financial district, the downtown area where I live, sort of by the Boston Garden, or the TD Garden, excuse me. Had a cab driver correct me the other day. I'm like, I know where I live. Thank you.
You live near there? Wow, that's neat.
Well, I said Boston Garden, and he was like, it's the TD Garden. I'm like, relax. But Boston is so small. Like you can walk from the northernmost part of Boston to the southernmost part of Boston in about an hour and 15 minutes. Yeah. To walk from like Andersonville to Hegewisch is going to take you a day and a half. So that's how spread out Chicago is compared to where it looks like in Boston. But
Chicago has wider sidewalks, and we have more space.
And it's also a perfect grid. Chicago is a perfect square grid where the streets go like this and like this.
Well, some are slanted, like Milwaukee and so forth.
Well, okay, you pick like 4 streets out of 2 million, but in Boston, like if you need to go from here to here, like top left to bottom right, you have to go like you're going like all over the city. You're going around your ass to get to your elbow. Yeah, if that makes any sense. And if you miss a turn in Boston, like if you miss a turn in Chicago, you just make a turn at the next block, or the second block if there's a one-way system. If you miss a turn in Boston, you're never going home. You're 30 minutes away. That's true. So that's the big difference between.
And you get shin splints on the way.
Yes, you do. But I'll tell you what, Chicago cannot compete with the combination of fresh seafood jammed inside pasta, covered in sauce.
Yum.
I will die on this hill. The combination of like lobster ravioli, crab linguine, shrimp scallops risotto, like you can't find the combination of fresh seafood and homemade pasta covered in whatever sauce you want. Chicago does a lot of things well, but they can't touch Boston's seafood pasta. I promise.
Well, also Boston has really good bakeries. I forgot what they are, but there are a bunch of them in the city that are really they're very high quality.
Mike's, Bova's, and Modern Pastry.
Okay, there's a couple other ones I went to, but I went to them several times in 3 days or something. But okay, so let's go back to your career, because so I talked to you, you were on the radio and you're also on TV on NBC Sports. And then you popped up on my Twitter feed being on TV on the East Coast. But like, what was your trajectory?
I mean, it's not like anybody's trajectory that has ever done this, because and that's not to brag. It's just like, I think it's a lesson that nobody's path is the same in media. I got out of college at 23, interned a whole lot, got a job as a part-time producer reporter, slowly moved up to an anchor and then a part-time host. And then I decided, look, I want to host more, and it's not going to happen in Chicago where they just recycle every white male until the end of time. So I said, all right, I'm going to try something different. I'm going to go to Las Vegas, where, there were some friends that were at the Tribute Company that had started a business out in Las Vegas to do sports betting radio, which at the time was, nobody else was doing it.
Sorry to interrupt, but were you always into betting?
No, I mean, It probably started at about 13, 14, when I used to read the newspaper and read the odds section of the Sun Times sports page. And asked the right questions and, had some uncles or whatever that knew what they were talking about. And then, kids were gambling in high school for sure. But I started to cover it, um, you know, as a part-time thing. I did a podcast with a guy from The Score called Chicken Dinner, and we started that in 2016, and we had a lot of fun with it. Like, it was the most fun of my day. I cover sports or do a show or whatever, but then doing that podcast for 40 minutes with Joe Ostrowski was like the most fun, because we were talking about our hobby, and I pretty much turned a hobby into a career in some weird way. So the Vegas Sports and Information Network, which is run by the Musburgers, and Bill 80 is an executive there. I'm sure you know that name from the Tribune days.
Wait, Bill 80, yeah, Bill 80, but Musburgers, like, as in the sports guy?
Yeah. Brent Musburger's family is they're the ones that founded that network. So, and then Bill was an executive there. I think he's the COO still to this day. And they were looking for more people to join their network. And they're like, well, this kid's from Chicago. He knows what he's talking about. He knows sports. Let's give him a shot. And I ended up going there. And within 3 months, I was hosting every day, like, well, not every day, but 5 days a week, kind of split days. And then put in my time there, moved back to Chicago. And the boss that I had met in Vegas ended up moving to Boston. And as I told you earlier, he says, hey, I'm going to bring you to Boston one day. And March of 2020, he was about to bring me to Boston, and then COVID happened. So I didn't go to Boston. In fact, I had to stay in Chicago and do nothing, like most of us did. But I finally got here in December 2020. But it went from, college to the internships to raising up that Chicago ladder to taking a chance to go somewhere else, proving that I could hang. And then, just a dream job opportunity coming here to NESN, and now, being one of the hosts for our sports betting show. If I don't take that plunge and go to Vegas, I don't come here. So in some weird way, like, leaving Chicago gets me to Boston, and then who knows what happens in 5-10 years. I love it here for sure, but home is always going to be home. So we'll see what happens in the future, but that's sort of the Cliff Notes version of, getting from college to Chicago media into Las Vegas and walking into a casino every day for work, and then moving out to Boston after the pandemic. It's been a wild ride, and I don't know what's next, but I don't think I want to know what's next. Like, I'm excited to find out on the fly.
Well, yeah, and also, what your specialty is, because you've already, you've obviously found a niche, and you started, like you said, you started in your free time, and now you're getting paid for it. But what's it like to be on TV? How do you do TV? Do you wear low-cut dresses and stuff?
Yes, I usually 6-inch heels as well, and I just parade around the studio. It's a lot different than radio, because I remember in radio we used to make rundowns, right? And we used to do, all right, like from 8 to 8:08, here's the topic, here are some bullet points, and then go to commercial. And we do this for the next 50 minutes or so, and then if you have an hour show, you're done. If you have a 3-hour show, you get 2 more hours to fill. But it was very unscripted. My TV life is a little different, though, because I come from that radio life where I don't need to type out my entire script. Like, I can host a radio show with just some bullet points and some flashcards or whatever. So, I don't host the show. I'm basically an analyst on the show. So our host, Travis, will, we have a producer that will put all the ideas together, and we have 4 segments, A, B, C, and D block. But we sort of build the rundown together around the content and the conversations we want to have. But I don't go out there with like a script or anything, because we're really I think TV is supposed to be, at its core, it's supposed to be entertaining. Like, the hosts are supposed to look like they're having fun and they like each other. And by all accounts, that's what our show has been for the first 2 months. I say that like a very proud father. Well, let's see. No, it started, May 16th. So it hasn't even been 2 full months yet, but we have our morning meetings. We go through, the topics of the day. Like, today was Chris Sale's first start for the Red Sox, former White Sox pitcher Chris Sale. Like, he made his debut today. So the first segment, we were talking about Chris Sale and all the different ways you can bet on Chris Sale. How many hits will he give up? How many strikeouts? How long will he go in the game? Will the Red Sox win the game? Yada, yada. And then we sort of build the show around the topics of the day or the topics of the weekend, depending on what time of year it is. Football writes itself because we're talking about football. But, at this time of the year, it's mostly baseball because no hockey, no basketball, and no football. So we're getting creative, and we're trying to find ways to, entertain our audience, while also informing them on the bets they can make, why they should make these certain bets, and then sort of educate why lines are what they are and how they move and what affects the market. So it's really, it's a market that never sleeps. The stock market opens at X, closes at Y, Monday through Friday. The sports betting market doesn't sleep. It's open 24/7, 365. And like tonight's lines are done, and now we're on to tomorrow. And the lines are already moving for the Wednesday baseball games. And during football season, the games are on Sunday, but those lines open up the Sunday before, and they move throughout the week, and things are up and down. And it's basically the stock market for sports, only instead of stocks and companies, you have players and teams. And our job is to speak about all of these facets of sports and all of these different ways to wager on sports. And we try and help you study for the test, because odds are good. You have a 9-to-5 job, or you have a 10-to-6 job, or an 8-to-4 job, and you can't study these bets because you have a real job and you have things going on. So our job is to help get you to make informed bets, to make you a better sports bettor. It's essentially like we are the Bloomberg for sports betting, if you will. And that's our job. And we're trying to cram that into a show that balances entertainment at the top with the information and the education. I'm making it sound very simple. It's not this simple, but that's how I view it, at least.
Well, how do you learn all this information in order to make informed opinions?
You have to hang out in alleys for 6 years of your life,
right.
Basically.
Yeah.
No, I don't even know how to answer that. I mean, it's like being a sponge, you learn a lot, living in Las Vegas. That's for sure. I mean, I networked with probably 8 or 10 of the best sports bookers in Las Vegas, the guys who have been taking bets for years, 10, 20, 30 years, and picking their brains and asking them why things are and why things move and all that. And then, you're able to track betting lines, but I don't know. There's no study guide. There's no, Bible for like how to learn how to sports bet. It's a lot of trial and error. And I think a lot of the people that bet for a living, and I'm not one of them because I can't bet every day. It's an emotional roller coaster. Mm-hmm. Being wrong a lot is hard if you didn't know that, because we are wrong a lot. We're wrong about, I'd like to be right 55% of the time, which means I'm wrong 45% of the time. And that's maddening because being wrong sucks. But I think it's a lot of learning from losses, learning why you lost, and learning from bad habits. That it's a lot of trial and error. It's learning from the mistakes you've made, and that's how you become a better sports bettor.
Okay, but see, for the stock market, for instance, like we know that the stock market's down because of the war, and then also there are other, world events that affect the stock market. But with sports, I mean, you could have a good player and then he gets injured. I mean, there are these random, you're dealing with human beings. So it seems to me like it'd be difficult to predict the outcome when you deal with all these variables in a game.
Yeah. And then if a player gets hurt, say he gets hurt on a Thursday, like an Aaron Rodgers, for example, the Packers quarterback, odds makers tell me he's worth about 8 points to the point spread. So if the Packers are an 11-point favorite on a Thursday, say they're playing the Lions in Green Bay, and Aaron Rodgers, news comes out on Friday that he's out, that line goes from Green Bay -11 to Green Bay -3. And then the questions I get, do I still bet Green Bay, or now do I bet Detroit? And what is the backup going to do? And I don't know. I have no idea what he's going to do because we never see him play. Right. Aaron Rodgers plays, 16, 17 games a year going back, 10 years. He got hurt a couple times, but, we don't know some of these things. So we have to sort of, a thing like that is though, like everybody's going to bet the other side with Aaron Rodgers being out. So it almost makes like it's a buy low on Green Bay, because now, Margaret, I had to lay 11 on Thursday. So the Packers had to win by 12 or more. But now without Rodgers, the Packers are still a pretty good team and they only have to win by 4. So do you want to be late to the Lions at +4, or do you want to lay the Packers at -4? And I think these are the conversations that we have on our show. Like, what is the right bet? If there is a bet, we don't have to bet it, but we can explain how it moved why it moved, what it means, and what to expect from the absence of Rodgers and the insertion from this guy that you probably couldn't pick out of a lineup.
Yeah, and also didn't at one time he wasn't there an idea floating that he was going to retire? He said he was going to retire.
Yeah.
And then the odds were a certain way, and they're like, "Oh wait, no, he's not retiring. Wait, hold on, and people already put money down." And
yeah, there was a whole ordeal last summer. He was pretty much holding the team hostage. He said, he had told people close to Green Bay he was never going to play again. He had made up his mind, and then all of a sudden he had this epiphany where he was going to come back for one more year. And that year happened, and it looks like there's going to be more years. So I just don't believe anybody anymore, I guess is what we're getting at. Like, just let me know who's going to play, on Friday or Saturday. Let me know who's out there. I can assess from there. But yeah, that was a very weird situation last year where we didn't think Aaron Rodgers would ever play again. And now it looks like he's going to play another season off the last season that was supposed to be the last season. I confused myself with that guy.
Well, okay, also earlier I was asking you about TV, and you obviously you have a lot of experience with radio, but how has radio helped your TV?
I am willing to try things on the fly. I am, so used to, all right, hey, we don't have this cut, or we don't have this tape or whatever. We have this thing we were going to play that's 5 minutes. All right, we don't have that. All right, let's go to the phones. So I think it's the ability, and I remember I did play-by-play as well. For college baseball, college basketball. So I think the spontaneity of, like, how do you call a grand slam? I don't know. I don't know until it happens. Well, what do I do when the phones are out and the tape is out? Like, how do I adapt? I think the adaptability of radio has been the most important thing of my broadcast at this point in time. Like, if I were to take one thing that I think I cherish the most, it's the ability to adapt or troubleshoot or sort of go off the cuff and not rely on a piece of information or a piece of tape or a phone call, just to be able to fill without having any clue of where I'm going. You have to make words come out. So I don't freeze. I knock on wood, at least to this point, I don't freeze because I can always pivot. And I learned how to pivot working in radio, whether it be as a producer, a reporter, an anchor, or a host. You have to know where to go next if all things go to hell. And you don't really learn that until you're in radio. Like, radio was so good for learning how to make nothing, or make something out of nothing, rather.
Yeah. And then also when you are on, well, first of all, how long is your show?
Half hour. That's it.
Okay. And so when you're on, what's up with the teleprompters? Is that a thing now still, or?
Prompters are still a thing. Yes. Like I told you, I don't put anything on the prompter,
Right.
Maybe a quick nugget here and there, but the host will put, whoever's driving the ship, the host will have the script in the prompter. And yes, prompter's still a thing, still operated by a person, mind you, not a robot, because the robots will eventually rule the world, or so I'm told. But yeah, prompter's still a thing. You got the crew with the cameras, you've got the prompter, you've got the lighting crew, you've got the directors and the producers and the PAs and all that. It probably takes, let's see, we have 3 hosts on the set, and those are the only people you see, but we have 10 people working on the show on a given day behind the scenes. So it takes a village to get a show on the air. And there are so many people that are important to our TV show. And it's about 13, counting the 3 hosts, it's about 13 people putting all of these things together to make 3 people look like they know what they're talking about. But it's a family affair, that's for sure.
Well, it's interesting because a while ago, I interviewed a sports guy in St. Louis, and I went to a TV station. So he was, he did some TV appearances, but he was basically a radio guy. And I went to a TV station in St. Louis, and this one guy who was a veteran, he pointed to this room and he said, this used to all be full. And now it's like me and just this one other person. So I think it depends where you are, because sometimes it is a group of people and sometimes it's just a couple of people.
I would hate to be working on a TV show with only one person behind the scenes. That would be a problem. But then again, I guess things are better in Boston than they are in St. Louis. You said only one person on the crew?
Yeah, he was saying, yeah, essentially, I think because there are robots out there. So he was saying, like, I used to have all these different producers and stuff, and now there's this one person. Yeah. But oof. I don't want to say too much because it was sort of like not necessarily official information, but
it sounds like you're saying the robots are coming for my job.
Well, no, I mean, no, not that. But I think in some cases cameras are operated by robots because I've seen that at some smaller stations where there's a guy in a booth and he's controlling the cameras. It's not the guys at the camera itself.
We have some robotic cameras, but our main camera or two are still operated by, a union employee and all that. So yeah, I mean, we have several crew members. I mean, maybe things are better here than they are in most places. And if that's the case, hell yeah.
Well, but also it's because you're also sports because you're working at, it sounds like you're working at a great place. I mean, first of all, I love New England. So, and of course they have such great teams. And actually, I am currently reading the memoir or the book by Nick Foles. And he talks about, Nick, I don't know if people, if he's hugely popular, but he does describe his experience in football and eventually, helping the Eagles win. So
that is not going to throw me off because I am not a Patriots fan, but I know if you brought up the name Nick Foles in this newsroom to my right, that would not be pretty because some people still aren't over that Super Bowl between the Eagles and Pats.
Yeah, I'm sure. I know. I didn't want you to mention this. I didn't want to mention it to spite anybody, but it was a big deal. But anyway, now back to I know last time we did touch upon the Orthodox situation. And what is on the Orthodox calendar? Because I know you celebrate, you mentioned Orthodox Easter, Orthodox Christmas, anything else happening this summer?
No, we're very simple. We are poor Orthodox followers. I think, holiday people, as my dad calls them still to this day, Serbian Christmas, where all the gifts are half off after regular Christmas. Right. That's on January 7th every year. And then Serbian Easter, of course, fluctuates with normal Catholic Christian Easter, if you will. But yeah, they're a week removed. I don't know why that is. I probably should know that.
It's a different calendar. They follow a different calendar.
Is that what it is?
Yes.
Okay. Well, then you already knew the question or the answer to the question. Yeah, I mean, so Serbian Easter is long gone. And the next one, I will probably do the lamb again this year for Serbian Christmas. That's a big thing. We love to just take a big animal and throw it in the oven. I guess that's our favorite thing to do. And then they have the church and go to mass and all that. But yeah, it's very simple. We're two trick ponies. Serbian Christmas, Serbian Easter. Very poor Orthodox followers.
Okay, so you don't do the other stuff in the meantime.
No. We're Johnny come latelys.
Okay, so actually, can you talk about your Serbian background? I know that is there were a lot of Serbs at one point in Chicago, especially the South Side.
Well, I'm a blonde-haired, blue-eyed white kid from Chicago, so it's not like I have this big ethnic past. But my father's side of the family grew up on the Southeast side in the steel mills, where I'm sure a lot of Chicagoans know it was very, very ethnic over there. Croatians, Serbians, Lithuanians, a lot of them working in the mills. And, they came over from, across the pond and needed work. And that was at the time, U.S. Steel was king of the castle. And there were a lot of mills over there on the Southeast side, and there were ironworking plants and all that. And a lot of those people that came from those countries got jobs there. So that's the extent of my knowledge. I haven't been to Serbia, and I'm, not somebody who speaks the language or anything. And I didn't really go to church or anything like that. But I know in the family, it's a very big family. My dad's a child of a family that had 9 brothers and sisters. And, their parents were born in Yugoslavia, which is now Serbia. So that's really the extent of my knowledge. But that part of Chicago is still very, very Serbian and Croatian, the East Side, Hegewisch area. A lot of them have sort of filtered down into, Indiana, whether it be Cherville or St. John or whatever. But that Southeast side of Chicago was a cultural melting pot, from the, even going back to World War II, the 40s into the 50s, and then throughout the 80s and 90s. That was big time, people working in those mills and in those jobs, whether they were from, the old country or whether their parents or grandparents were from there. That was really a big time part of Chicago that built a lot of Chicago, because a lot of the steel that built Chicago is from the Southeast side. And I think that's a different story for a different day. But yeah, that's that's my extent of the Serbian, I guess, habitat from that time.
Okay, yeah, because Hagwish is still a really nice place to live. It hasn't become like it hasn't been become more degraded like some other areas of the South Side. I don't know why I'm like coughing. I don't have COVID, but
Sure.
okay. So is there anything else you'd like to say? Because in this little update that we're doing,
Is there anything
like
I'd
eight
like
years
to
later,
say?
yeah, because I
8 years
last talked to
later.
you, and I cannot believe you are not stuck up. Okay, I just want to say that for record because I have seen people around the city who I knew back then, back when, and they are just like not
Do they,
simpatico.
do
So
they ignore you?
I've had some interesting experiences, but they pretend like they don't know me or whatever. But yeah, that's what I'm saying is like one time I texted or I tweeted, sent a message to you, and then the way you responded, I thought, wow, this guy's sort of cool. And of course, you're willing to do this, even though you're like a big TV star in New England. So
First of all, not a big TV star. Second of all, don't inflate my tires. Nobody needs that. I will say this.
but aren't you also
I
on Fox Sports?
maybe I am a star. I don't know.
Well, Fox Sports is a big deal too.
I'm not a TV star. Cut it. But let me just say this. I remember the way I was treated when I was 22, 23 by some people. And there's no need to name names. But I remember thinking to myself at that time, and when I grew up, I never wanted to be a radio person or a TV person. I wanted to do something around sports. I didn't know what it was. And, I just happened to get lucky and do the right things at the right time and make it to NESN and Fox and all that. But I think the way you treat people, and that's not just me being somebody who talks about sports and betting, the way you treat people matters, like more than anything. And I remember like just the way people used to disrespect their producers and their interns.
Oh yeah.
And I just hated that shit.
Oh
I
my
hated that
gosh.
shit.
Oh
You
my
know?
gosh.
And
Yes.
I used to see it from
Oh,
people that I knew had a persona, because people would always say, what's it like to work with so and so?
That's not
He or
name,
she must be great.
right.
And I'd be like, he's kind of a dick, and they go, oh, no way. And, well, yeah, because the people you see on TV for 5, 10, 30, 60 minutes at a time, that's who they are on camera and not who they are off camera. And I always told myself, and I'm not making this up. I always told myself, I'm going to be the same person off that I am on, and I'm going to respect people that I work with, because I remember what it was and what it was like to work with people that you just couldn't stand. And they just like talked down to you and barked orders to you and disrespected you. And I never liked that. And I never wanted to do that.
Well, then there's also the added, it's not just that, it's also the added, like they create cliques. And then if you're in the clique, doors open. If you're not in the clique, doors don't. And I file that stuff away too. I can't speak. I also file that stuff away. Go ahead.
So I just didn't want to be somebody that, because if you lose the crew, you lose everything. If the people that you work with don't like you and don't respect you, that show or that faction of your career is going to suffer.
Yeah.
So I have always been a very familial type person, a very friendly person. I got my, what do they call it? Predictive index back that I took when I started here. And they told me in the social category, I was in the 99.9% tile or whatever. Wow. I guess they're like, we've never seen anything like this here. Like, you're the most social employee we've ever had.
Wait, how did they do that? Wait, what do you mean? Like it's
like a 50 question quiz about like you. It's like a personality quiz. Okay. And they rank how you test and all that. And they were like, you are in the 99.9 percentile of social humans. And I was like, oh, cool. So like, I like to get along with people and I like to hang out with people, and we go out after work, we hang out, we drink, we eat, whatever. But I never wanted anybody that worked with me when I got here to just loathe working with me. But that comes from being treated, like just a number, I mean, remember I would enter for somebody for 6 months, didn't know my name. Like, how is that a thing? So I just never forgot what it was like back then. And I just pay that all forward into the job now. So just treat people with respect and be nice to people. It's not that hard.
Now, okay, one question is like, what if you pay it forward and you're helping somebody and then they clips you or they end up getting your job, not because they're doing devious stuff, but do you ever think about that? I already asked somebody else this in another live stream. So what do you think
No,
about that?
I'm
Okay.
not worried about. No, I'm not worried
Some
about
people,
that.
because some people act that way because they're worried about possible competition.
I think competition is good. If anything, I compete. Well, not compete because compete's the wrong word, but there are three betting hosts at NESN, and we don't compete with each other, but it is like it's not like I need to pick all these games right. I hope you get all these games wrong. But look, when Claudia gets three games right, like I want to get three games right. You know what I mean? So it's a healthy competition, but competition is good. Like, if going back to, playing high school sports or whatever, like we didn't want to play bad teams all season because then when you get to the playoffs, you're going to lay an egg against a good team. So I think the best bring out the best, and that could be producers, directors, content people, hosts, co-hosts. Like I have no issue with competition, and I don't look if I lose my job because I'm being nice to somebody. I can't even imagine that. Like I could see it the other way, where if I treat people with disrespect and I don't like people and I'm a curmudgeon at work, like that's how I get heat. So I'd rather go down the nice guy than go down the bad guy.
Yeah, because there are some media people who it's called like it's like they pull up the ladder, like they get some kind of success and they pull up the ladder because they don't want other people. Whatever. It's I've just been in it for a while, so whatever. It's a lot of drama, but
It
it's
is.
sort of. But I have to. I recently did a live stream with somebody, and he did work with some literally successful Hollywood people, and he said they were so great because they basically talk to everybody, like, "Hey, how's it going?" Even if you're a minor character in their show. So it says a lot, when people are like that. They take the time to get to know people.
I think I know everybody's name here.
That's good. Now, any other things you want to discuss, like any other advice or anything, or any insight or anything?
Any more advice? I think I'm out of time on advice.
Yeah, see, I know you got to go to you got to go to the bar or whatever. Do what the
no, I don't have to go to the bar. I do have more work to do. But no, I mean, I feel like if there's anything that you missed, just go back to the beginning. I mean, I've tried to sprinkle some things along this conversation, and back to the point about working hard, meeting people, remembering people. It's a huge deal, but also just being compassionate. And I saw this quote the other day. It was something like, you never know when the person next to you is about to fall apart. Just be nice to them. And that, like, you don't know, like people I work with, people that I interact with, like, okay, they put on a front at work or whatever, but you don't know what they're going through at home. So just give people the benefit of the doubt, be nice to people, have a heart, will you? Like it's not hard to do that. Like this world at times is very tough. Life is way too short. And it's easier when you share the respect that you want to receive the other way. And it's that simple. Like I sound like a broken record, but
yeah.
You reach out to me and say, hey, like would love you to come on my show. Absolutely. Because we have a relationship. We go back, we're friends.
Yeah. And then also, and the next time in Boston, I'm going to call you up and you can come to the fancy area. We stay in a hotel, but then next time I stay with my cousin because he lives in the same neighborhood, fancy neighborhood. But I was going to say also, I did interrupt you earlier about the Bulls locker room. Anything else you'd like to share about that? Because you talked earlier about it and I interrupted you.
Just Joakim Noah being one of the most unique human beings you could ever be around. I mean, just the smile that lights up a room, the camaraderie that he had. And I remember that's a kid who was like very lowly recruited his sophomore, junior year out of high school. So had a chip on his shoulder and just wanted to bring this baby Bull team on the map with a young Derrick Rose and a young Luol Deng. And being around Joe, he's got all these causes in the city, the Rock Your Drop. He's very good in the inner city. He's got these foundations. And that was just a guy that she like gravitated toward. Like, that he's a good guy, and basketball for him. Yeah, it's a job, but it's his passion. But he's passionate about so many other things like culture and music and food and family and neighborhoods and all that. And he was just a very complex guy. And he was the heartbeat of that locker room. And it was a very good group to be around. I mean, he was, if I had to make a Mount Rushmore of guys that I got to cover that I love being around, it's Jonathan Taves, it's Joakim Noah, it is Anthony Rizzo, and it's probably Who's the fourth? It's not a bear because I didn't cover any good bears.
Right.
Rizzo, Taves. Who's my fourth? I should know this. I set this up and totally blew it.
Yeah. No, but I can ask you something else because while you're thinking about that, but with the locker room, back to the locker room thing, I know we're going full circle. The guys who light up the locker room, is it that they're encouraging and joking around with their other people there? They're just not sticking to themselves, or because I just think of locker rooms like guys in towels, and having fun with each other, whatever, giving each other a hard time.
That's what you imagine the locker room. No, that is
I don't
not.
know.
It's holding people accountable. It's knowing what to say. But again, we don't see everything in the locker rooms. We only see what they let us see. And we go in there, 2 hours before the game and then 30, 40 minutes after the game. But it's just the, ability to look you in the eye, win or lose, victory or defeat, answer the questions respectfully. And that's that. Those were the best locker rooms.
But now, did you remember the fourth person?
No, I didn't.
Okay, well, we can tweet that out if you remember.
Okay.
So. Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for taking time out. And okay, I'll see you on the East Coast sometime because I want to go back there to party with my cousin who lives in this cool place, and he has an incredible bar inside his place. But all right, so I guess I'll talk to you again.